Women who have not had children don't have a referent, but since you're all adults, you have had a period, and cramps, and PMS, which is putting up with men's shit. Okay, right? You have a referent. The men want to know, why do you want to know how I feel? What does that matter? Why do you want to know my feelings? Feelings. Emotions. Male kryptonite. Okay? Those are all reference. Consensus reality. We agree that certain things are real based on our experiences. All right? So I've never been a junkie. I have taken opiates that were prescribed, but not to the point of addiction. I have watched people in withdrawal. Not pretty. I didn't want to do that. Hate needles. Don't even want to shoot insulin. Right? A lot of people are squeamish, but some people get into the chemistry of the ritual of preparing drugs for injection and shooting them. Okay? Because they don't have ritual in their lives. That's what they're missing. What is your relationship with death? Right? That is a reality. We deal, as pros, we deal with death as part of addiction, as part of dealing with life. So people's relationship with death. Some people's addictions is based on, you can tell almost what's going on emotionally with somebody by what they're strung out on. Like the opposite of the drug. So I know somebody is like self-medicating with weed. I self-medicated with weed because I was angry. For a really good reason. Excellent reason. You would have been angry too. And I smoked weed and I wasn't angry. Until the weed stopped working. And it stops working. So, I know people who are strung out on marijuana. Yeah, I have a rage problem. Yeah, right. And the weed's not working. Even if you're smoking top shelf, you have a tolerance and it stops working. That's why it's so hard to get off. Because you're angry and, yeah, I'm taking Xanax and smoking weed and it still ain't working. Right. Of course not. It's always going to stop, you're always going to develop tolerance. That's what your nervous system is designed to do.
Consensus reality, is that like community-based evidence? Or
it can be, right? Because, for example, I've told you about Candace Pert in The Molecules of Emotion, right? So if you read that book, she talks about she's a woman in a boys' community, a boys' club of science at the federal level. So she discovered the opiate receptor. And her model for describing what it was a lock in a key. Because the boys could not get what she actually said, which was a neurotransmitter comes near a cell and they dance because they don't actually touch, and it causes the cell to sing and make other chemicals. That was too out there for the boys. The women get it. It's a dance. And it causes the cell to sing, because when you dance, you feel good inside, right? And the cell, that's what this relationship is with these chemicals. But the boys didn't get that. So they got lock and key, because they didn't know about sticking things into other things, right? So, and when you read that story, she's going, what? And they tried to steal her research and discredit her. And she said, yeah, because I was an attractive woman. They couldn't deal with the fact that I was an attractive woman, and they basically, sexually harassed me and all this other stuff, and said that I was too emotional and blah-de-blah-de-blah-de-blah. But she fought them and she won. So knowing what the barriers are in front, that's what she wanted to do, was the science. And look where she's taken it. So you can read her other books too, and not just the movie, What the Bleep Do We Know? So consensus reality is You and I have to agree on a common experience. We may have different experiences, but what we can agree on, and that becomes real. If you can't agree, good point, thanks for asking that. Remember to ask questions, because, yeah, what if you can't agree? You still have your experience. You still have your experience. And if it's true for you and you can validate it in the ways that are true for you, it remains true for you until they get it. You know, my doctoral program. Mark, what do you mean that gangs are memes? Gangs are memes. These white kids are acting like black gangsters because by their self-report, they don't like the hypocrisy of their parents and general mainstream society. They don't like it. And so they're joining the enemy because the enemy's telling them a truth that they want to believe in. And I said, it's just like their grandparents becoming Indians by being hippies, calling yourself Laughing Water or whatever. And, you know, I'm going to eat organic food and live on the land and wear beads and feathers in my hair and, you know, listen to rock music and drop acid and eat peyote and blah-de-blah-de-blah-de-blah. It's a protest. Mark, that's crazy. You explain why they're doing it then, because that's what they're saying. You show me the data. I'm just telling you what they're saying, and it makes sense. So what you need to do is train them to change society the way they want it to be, or act in a just way. Now, the kids didn't disagree with me. You understand what I'm talking about. Why couldn't this PhD? So, a reference, psychological object, like an experience. Once you have the experience, so one of the things I say about, okay, if I taught you to do what the drugs do for you, you don't need the drug. You can create the experience without the drug. You can. Every time you got high, every time you got drunk, you created a space in your memory that you can go to. The drug is showing you the possibility. Or maybe things you want to avoid. Whoa, I don't want to do that again. Okay? So, think of an experience. Now, I'm setting you up for a construct. Think of an experience like a point in space. Boom. There is a point. Point is an experience. So, for example, in the beginning of your life, you begin to learn to separate yourself from your environment and form an identity. This is basically a psychological stage that the babies go through, and those of you who've been parents who've observed this can see this. And we all went through this. There are certain structures in our body. Baby is pretty much helpless. And a stage of development is when they can turn themselves over without help. That's the setup. They have to work their core to be able to do that. And when they do that, then they start pushing with their arms and their legs until they can get upright. But they can't crawl until that ball and socket joint develops. Have to crawl first before you can stand. Have to stand before you can walk. Have to walk before you can run. Mom still exists when I don't see her in the room. That's called object permanence. And you can see it in them. They will cry if they don't see mom, and then all of a sudden they see mom. Okay, they're cool. But then if they understand that mom still exists when she leaves the room, that's an object permanence. It's a psychological state that builds on each other. So, beginning of your life, you begin to separate yourself from the environment. baby expresses emotions, acquires language, learns to eat, walk, and use its body. So point is an experience, an emotion, a memory. Points added together make a line. Okay, this is basic geometry. Psychogeometry, if you will. So a line is a series of points, some of which are related, some of which may be off the wall or off the line or lead to other lines. So each higher dimension contains a piece of the others in it. Okay? So, point of view, a point can only see other points close to it. A line of thought can only see lines and points. Okay, so a line can see other lines and points, but not squares and complex structures. So in addiction, your attention is focused on a single point. Getting more dope or repeating the experience. You don't necessarily see where this is going because you're focused on the point. You're certainly not focused on a square because you can't see that until you get clean. Can't see another dimension. So we basically say that there's spirit, there's your body, there's your mind, and your emotions. The idea that they're balanced. So Harriet Tubman once said, "I freed 1,000 slaves. I could have freed 1,000 more if only they knew they were slaves." That's her quote. Dr. Matula Shakur ran the Black Panther free heroin detox program and is serving a life sentence in jail, essentially for doing that.
How old is he right now?
He's still alive.
I mean, like, how old is
He's late 60s, I think. Yeah. Yes.
Any relation to Tupac?
It's like stepfather.
Yeah.
Yeah. Basically what happened is, I'm not sure why you would bust a program whose only purpose is to get people off of heroin for free. But basically the cops said that he was part of an organization where they said somebody had robbed a bank, and even though the bank robbers weren't connected to him or the program, and there was no guns and no money coming to the program, well, you're part of the Black Panthers, and we busted this guy who's a bank robber, so you're going to jail too. Bye. Interesting. So the wisdom way of the teacher. In addiction, you're pretty much focused on exclusively on the physical, within the physical body. Though you might have a need for something greater than yourself, you sense there's something more, and there is, but how do you get there? So in the wisdom way of the teacher, life is a school, and you repeat the lessons, or the lessons are repeated until you get it, and then thrown at you again in variations. This is one of the annoying things about math, right? Okay. Well, if you think of math like, we were talking about the other day, where you have an answer, and then you have the question, and in the middle is the process. So the annoying part is the process. That's what's difficult. So conditioning natural mind. You have spirit, mind, emotions, and body. Each of those is a line of experiences, which if you deepen it, you become a more multidimensional person. Now, some people are more comfortable with their mind than spirit. Some people are more comfortable with their emotions than the mind. Some people are in their bodies, some people ignore their bodies, some people expand their spirit to the exclusion of their mind and emotions and bodies. You can see where this could be distorted in terms of health. So this idea is that this inner cube is your world. What you may or may not see is that there are forces outside of your world that are shaping it. So the idea is become aware of those forces and shape it yourself rather than be shaped. Okay, so understanding that if your thing was addictive underground economy drugs, okay, you've got to understand, I'm trying to self-medicate this feeling of helplessness because this drug makes me feel powerful, or I'm in pain and this drug distracts me and takes it away. What you need to do is go beyond the pain and look at where it's coming from. Because what keeps some of the forces in place is not knowing, and the people around you not knowing. So there's no consensus to be able to talk about what's happening. This is one of the powers of 12-step groups, because at least you get a community of folks who've gone through some of the same experiences that you have, and you can talk about it. Only problem with that, as I've talked about, is if there are experiences outside of what the 12-step framework allows you to talk about, you're screwed. Doesn't talk about economic privilege or class privilege or race privilege or gender privilege or any of that other kind of stuff that also might shape your worlds too. All right, so if we talk about spirit, these things are only separated to talk about them. Spirit is the real experience of connection to something greater than yourself. It's referred to in at least two ways in the Western religious tradition. So there's a difference between spirituality and religion, but without getting into that, there is the silent, compassionate witness within you. That's a part of you. That's beyond your mind and emotions, and a component of your spirit. The silent, compassionate witness and the still, small voice within. This could be like your intuition. So silent, compassionate witness basically watches everything that goes on from a point beyond your mind and emotions. It's recording what's going on. Oh, they're doing this again. And the still, small voice within says, maybe you should rethink that. Maybe you should do something else. That's the voice that's always right. You should have listened. You didn't. So these things can be cultivated so this is part of a consensus reality that I'm telling you about. This is how they're referred to in the literature. Angie refers to it in her book, Angie Arian in the Fourfold Way. Talks about this in her book in different ways. All right? So, your own personal intuition, it's always true and correct. You know you should have listened. So, intuition is the voice of the inner teacher. And within, power, capacity to be effective, mind. Power within mind. So the voice of the inner teacher is in you already, all the time. Even when you're strung out. Will you listen? So, discipline. Discipline is to follow an inner teacher. So it often helps to have an outer teacher to model, but it's not required. Discipline is to follow and develop your own inner teacher. How the teacher teaches, using examples, we have a particular style, is as important and maybe more important than the content of the information. My teaching style is based on the people that trained me and the people that have come to me. Talk about the uncomfortable till it becomes comfortable. Talk about life and death stuff directly. Talk to people where they are, not down to them. Look, you're not dumb. You just were not raised to talk about this. It's happening to you. And the people around you didn't talk about it. Of course. I've been there. I've been called crazy. And yeah, I am. I'm suffering from Maui deficit disorder. So,